Louis Vale stood at the kitchen sink, scrubbing grease from his hands with the cheap orange soap that never quite worked. The factory smell clung to him: oil, metal, sweat. 10 hours on the floor, checking pressure valves, running diagnostics, making sure nothing exploded. The water ran cold against his skin. It always ran cold first. He'd been meaning to fix the water heater for weeks, maybe months now, but between double shifts at factory and trying to keep the lights on, small repairs fell to the bottom of a very long list. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the drip of the faucet he also needed to fix. Louis watched the water circle the drain, carrying away the orange soap suds. His hands were raw, calloused from years of manual work. These were the hands of his father, het-hot sometimes, work-worn and tired. But unlike his father, Louis had built something with these hands. A degree, a career, a life that was supposed to be better. Behind him, Ruby's voice cut through the quiet house like a blade through silk. "We're going to the Mitchells' party Saturday. I already told them we'd bet here." Louis shut off the water. He dried his hands on a dish towel, the fabric rough and threadbare. He turned around slowly. Ruby sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, her face lit by the screen's pale glow. Her nails were done, bright red, freshly painted. She must have gone to the salon today. They couldn't really afford the salon, but Louis had stopped commenting on those things months ago. Every comment became a fight. She hadn't looked up when she spoke. She never looked up anymore. "I'm working Saturday," Louis said, keeping his voice even. "Call in sick." "I can't just call in sick, Ruby. We need the overtime. Other people call in sick all the time. Other people don't have a mortgage payment due next week." Ruby finally looked up, her eyes sharp with irritation. "Everyone else has a normal life, Louis. Everyone else gets to go out on weekends, see friends, have fun. But not us. Never us." Now she looked up. Her eyes were sharp, irritated. "Everyone else has a normal life, Louis. Everyone else gets to go out on weekends. But not us. Never us. We go out," Louis said, pouring himself a glass of water from the tap. "Where? The diner? The grocery store?" She tossed her phone onto the table with a sharp clack. Kelly Mitchell just got back from Miami. Her husband took her for their anniversary. A whole week in Miami, Louis. They stayed at a resort. On the beach. Frank Mitchell owns 3 car dealerships. And you're a mechanical engineer with a college degree. You should be making more than this. She gestured around the kitchen, at the chipped laminate countertop, the old refrigerator that hummed too loud and shook when it cycled, the linoleum floor that was cracking near the stove. "This isn't what I signed up for." Louis felt something tighten in his chest, a familiar pressure that had been building for months, maybe years. They'd had this conversation before, many times. Each iteration left him feeling smaller, more tired, more aware of all the ways he was failing in her eyes. He'd grown up poor in the mountains of western North Carolina, in a house with gaps in the floorboards where you could see straight through the dirt underneath. His father had been a drunk who worked construction when he was sober enough and spent every paycheck at the bar when he wasn't. Louis remembered winters so cold he'd slept in his clothes. Summers so hot the tar paper on the roof melted and dripped. He'd worked his way out of that life one painful step at a time. Community college while working nights at a gas station. State school on loans and rents. Finally, an engineering degree and a job that paid enough to buy this house that he owed him. This house, modest and imperfect as it was, represented everything he'd fought to build. Clean walls, running water, heat in winter, stability, safety, a foundation that Ruby, it represented failure. "I'm working on something," Louis said quietly, setting down his glass. "The consultancy idea. If I can save enough to, you've been talking about that for 3 years. Ruby stood up, grabbing her phone and her purse. The purse was new too, leather, expensive looking. Another thing they couldn't afford. "I'm going to bed." "Ruby, wait. I'm tired, Louis. I'm tired of this conversation. I'm tired of this life." She walked past him without another word, without looking at him, without touching him. They'd stopped touching months ago. Her perfume lingered in the air as she left, something expensive and floral that she'd bought on a credit card they couldn't afford to pay off. The scent made Louis' stomach hurt that he stood alone in the kitchen, listening to her footsteps on the stairs, listening to the bedroom door close above him. The house felt enormous suddenly, full of empty spaces and silence that pressed against his ears. Louis stood alone in the kitchen. Upstairs, he could hear Rose moving around in her room, probably getting ready for bed. She was 9 years old, smart as a whip, always drawing pictures or reading books beyond her grade level. She was the one good thing in this house. The one thing that still made sense. He climbed the stairs and knocked softly on her door. "Come in, Dad." Rose sat on her bed in pajamas, covered with stars. A notebook lay open in her lap, filled with sketches of trees and animals. "You should be sleeping," Louis said, but he smiled. "Almost done." She held up the notebook. "Look, it's a fox." The drawing was remarkably detailed for a 9-year-old. The fox's eyes seemed to follow him across the room. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. Can I show Mom?" Louis hesitated. "Maybe tomorrow. She's tired tonight." Rose nodded, understanding more than a child should. She closed the notebook and set it on her nightstand. "Dad, are you and Mom fighting again?" "No, honey. We're just talking." "I heard her yelling." Louis sat on the edge of her bed. He wanted to tell her everything would be okay, that families went through rough patches, that love could survive anything. But he'd never been good at lying, especially to Rose. "Sometimes adults disagree," he said carefully. "But that doesn't change how much we both love you." Rose looked at him with those dark, serious eyes. "I love you too, Dad." He kissed her forehead and turned off her lamp. "Get some sleep." The weeks that followed confirmed what Louis already suspected. Ruby was pulling away, and fast. She started going out more. Lunch with friends, shopping trips that lasted all day, evenings at the gym that stretched past midnight. Louis worked his shifts, came home to an empty house, and made dinner for Rose. He helped her with homework, listened to her talk about school, tucked hair in at night. Then one Thursday evening, Ruby came home glowing. She wore a new dress, something tight and black that Louis had never seen before. Her makeup was different too, darker around the eyes. She looked like someone trying very hard to be someone else. "Where's Rose?" she asked, not quite meeting his gaze. "At Kelly Mitchell's. Sleepover." "Oh, right." Ruby set her purse on the counter. Her hands moved nervously, adjusting her hair, touching her necklace. Louis wiped down the stove where he'd been cooking dinner. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About this." He gestured at her, at the dress, at the lateness of the hour. "About where you've been going." "About us." Ruby's jaw tightened. "There's nothing to talk about." "I think there is." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk?" "Fine. Let's talk about how I'm 38 years old and living like I'm broke. Let's talk about how I watch all my friends take vacations and buy nice things while I'm stuck in this house with these." She waved at the cramped kitchen. "With this life. This is our life, Ruby. We built it together. You built it. I just got trapped in it." The words hit him harder than he expected. Louis set down the dishcloth. His voice came out flat, controlled. "What are you saying?" Ruby met his eyes finally. Hers were cold, decided. "I'm saying I want more. I deserve more. We all want more. That's why I'm working double shifts. That's why I'm trying to start the consultancy. But these things take time. I don't have time, Louis. I'm not getting any younger." There was something else in her voice now, something that made Louis' stomach drop. "You've met someone." She didn't deny it. She just stood there, defiant. "Who is he?" "His name is Ryland Drew. He's an entrepreneur. He's successful. She stopped herself, but the damage was done. "He's everything I'm not." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Ruby grabbed her purse. "I'm going out." "Don't," Louis said. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. "Ruby, please, think about Rose. Think about what we're throwing away." She paused at the door. For a moment, Louis thought she might stay, might turn around and try to fix what was breaking between them. But then she shook her head. "I already have thought about it, Louis. I've thought about nothing else for months. And I'm done thinking." The door closed behind her. Louis stood in the kitchen, listening to her car start, listening to the engine fade down the street. The house felt enormous suddenly, full of empty spaces and silence. He'd known this was coming. Maybe he'd known for years. But knowing didn't make it easier. He sat at the kitchen table where Ruby had sat so many nights, complaining about their life, about him, about everything he couldn't give her. He thought about his father, drunk and mean in that mountain shack. He thought about the promises he'd made to himself as a boy, that he'd never be like that he'd work hard and build something stable, something good. And now his wife was leaving him for a drug dealer named Ryland Drew. Lewis didn't cry. He learned a long time ago that crying didn't fix anything. Instead, he did what he always did when the world got too heavy. He pulled out his laptop and opened the files for the factory explosion case. 6 months ago, there'd been an accident at the plant where he worked. A pressure valve had failed, causing a rupture in one of the main lines. 3 workers ended up in the hospital. Lewis had flagged the faulty valve weeks before the explosion, had written report after report to management, but they'd ignored him. Replacing the valve would have cost money, and the plant was behind on production quotas. After the explosion, they'd fired him. They claimed he'd failed to follow proper safety protocols. They blamed him for the very disaster he'd tried to prevent. So Lewis found a lawyer, and he filed a lawsuit that IT was a long shot. The company had deep pockets and a team of corporate attorneys. But Lewis had documentation. Every email, every report, every warning he'd sent up the chain of command. He had proof, and he had nothing left to lose. 3 months later, Ruby moved out. She packed her things in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon while Lewis was at work. When he came home, half the furniture was gone. So were most of the photos from the walls. The house looked gutted, violated. Rose sat on the stairs, crying. Lewis dropped his toolbox and went to her. He sat beside her and pulled her close. She buried her face in his chest. "Mom's leaving," Rose whispered. "I know, baby. I know." She said, "I have to stay with her sometimes. On weekends." "That's okay. You'll still see her. But I want to stay here. With you." Lewis held her tighter. He wanted to tell her that everything would work out, that Ruby would come to her senses, that they'd find a way through this. But the truth was simpler and harder. "Things are going to be different now," he said. "But I promise you, Rose, I will always be here. Always." She nodded against his chest. They sat there on the stairs until the light outside faded and the house grew dark around them. Ruby moved into an apartment across town with Ryland Drew. Lewis met him once when Ryland came to pick up Rose for the weekend. Lewis was working in the garage, organizing his tools, when he heard the car pull up. Not Ruby's Honda. Something else. He walked to the driveway and saw a black BMW with tinted windows, chrome wheels that probably cost more than Lewis made in a month. The engine cut off, and Ryland stepped out. That he was exactly what Lewis expected. Slicked back dark hair, expensive watch catching the sunlight, cologne that smelled like money he probably didn't have. He wore designer jeans and a leather jacket, sunglasses perched on his head. Everything about him screamed, "Look at me." He was younger than Lewis by maybe 5 years, still had that smoothness that came from never having worked hard for anything real. Ryland saw Lewis and walked over with his hand extended, smile bright and false. "You must be Lewis," Ryland said. His teeth were too white, probably bleached. Lewis didn't take the offered hand. He just stood there, arms crossed, tools still in his grip. "Rose will be down in a minute." Ryland lowered his hand, unfazed by the rejection. His smile didn't waver. "Look, man, I know this is weird, the whole situation, but I just want you to know I'm going to take good care of them. Ruby and your daughter, they're important to me. Her name is Rose." "Right, yeah, Rose. She seems like a great kid. Ruby talks about her all the time." Lewis said nothing. He stood in the driveway, blocking Ryland's view into a house, his body language making it clear the man wasn't welcome any closer. Above them, he could hear Rose moving around in her room, gathering her things for the weekend. Taking her time. She never won Ted-to go. Ryland shifted his weight, less comfortable now, the smile starting to crack at the edges. "I'm not trying to replace you or anything. Ruby and we've got something good going. I can give her things, experiences, a life. You're just sleeping with my wife and playing house with my daughter." The smile disappeared. Ryland's jaw tightened. "Look, man, Ruby makes her own choices. This is what she wants. I didn't force her into anything. Ruby wants a lot of things. Most of them she can't afford. Most of them didn't last. Maybe she just needed someone who could give her more. Someone who isn't stuck in this." Ryland gestured at the modest house. The old truck in the driveway. The life Lewis had built with his own hands. Someone with ambition. Lewis stepped closer, closing the distance between them. He wasn't a large man, average height and build, but he'd worked with his hands his whole life. There was a hardness in him that came from growing up poor and fighting for everything. Rylan had money, flash, charm. Lewis had steel underneath. You can buy her things, Lewis said, his voice low and controlled. You can take her places, rent fancy apartments, drive expensive cars. Beauty'll never give her more than I already did. Because I gave her honesty, that I gave her stability. I gave her a man who worked for what he had instead of pretending and scheming. And when your schemes fall apart, and they will, she'll realize what she traded away. Rylan's face flushed. You don't know anything about me. I know exactly what you are. I've met men like you my whole life. All surface, no depth. You'll burn through whatever money you've got, and when it's gone, you'll burn through her too. That's not going to happen. It already is. I can see it in your eyes. You're worried. Worried I might say something that makes her think twice. Worried that deep down, she knows she made a mistake. Rylan opened his mouth to respond, anger flashing hot across his features. But Rose appeared at the top of the stairs. Her backpack was slung over her shoulder, her face guarded and neutral. She'd learned to hide her feelings around Ruby and Rylan. Learned to make herself small and quiet to avoid conflict. I'm ready, she said, her voice soft. Lewis stepped aside. Rose came down the stairs and hugged him tightly. He held her for a long moment, breathing in the smell of her shampoo, feeling her small frame pressed against him. She was 9 years old and already learning that the world could be cruel. Call me if you need anything, Lewis said, pulling back to look at her face. Anytime, day or night. Doesn't matter what time it is. You call me. I will, Dad. I love you, sweetheart. I love you too. She walked past Rylan to the car without looking at him. Rylan followed, his swagger diminished. Lewis stood in the doorway and watched them drive away, the BMW's engine rumbling down the quiet street, too loud for the neighborhood. He stood there until the car disappeared around the corner, until the sound faded completely. Then he went inside, closed the door, and got back to work on his lawsuit, because that was all he could do. Work, plan, build a case, make sure that when everything fell apart, and it would, he'd be ready. 5 years passed like a slow bleed. Lewis worked construction jobs when he couldn't find engineering work. He fixed cars on weekends, took on freelance design projects, did whatever it took to pay the mortgage and keep Rose in good schools. The lawsuit crawled through the courts, delayed by motion after motion from the company's lawyers. They were trying to starve him out, betting he'd run out of money before they ran out of time. They didn't know Lewis Vale. His lawyer, a bulldog named Tom Henderson, worked on contingency. Every few months, they'd have another hearing, another deposition, another round of paperwork. The company offered settlements, small ones, insultingly small, but Lewis turned them down. This wasn't about the money. It was about being right. That IT was about proving that a man like him, who'd grown up with nothing, could stand up to a corporation and win. Rose turned 14. She was tall now, quiet, brilliant. She spent most of her time with Lewis. Ruby's weekends became sporadic, then rare, then almost non-existent. Rylan's entrepreneurial ventures kept failing, and a luxury apartment became a rental house, then a smaller rental house, then something barely better than the place Lewis had started with. But Ruby kept up appearances on social media. Fancy dinners she couldn't afford. Vacations that were really just day trips. A life that looked successful from the outside and was rotting from within. Lewis watched it all from a distance. He didn't interfere. He didn't gloat. He just kept working, kept raising Rose, kept pushing his lawsuit forward. And then, in late November, 5 years after he'd filed, the jury came back. Tom called him at 6 in the morning. We won. Lewis sat up in bed. What? We won, Lewis. $40 million. Negligence, wrongful termination, punitive damages. They threw the book at the company. The number didn't register at first. 40 million. It was too large, too abstract. Lewis had been living on 30,000 a year. 40 million might as well have been 40 billion. Are you there? Tom asked. I'm here. There'll be appeals, but we've got them. The jury verdict is solid. You going to be a wealthy man, Louis. Louis hung up and sat on the edge of his bed. Downstairs, Rose was getting ready for school. He could hear her moving around the kitchen, making breakfast. His daughter, who'd never asked for anything, who'd watched her mother chase money and never once blamed Louis for not having enough, he went downstairs. Rose was eating cereal at the counter, earbuds in, reading something on her phone. Louis touched her shoulder. She pulled out one earbud. "Morning, Dad." "Morning." He poured himself coffee. "Something happened." She set down her phone. "What?" "The lawsuit. It's over. We won." Rose's eyes widened. "Really? Really? How much?" He told her. She went quiet, processing. Then, in typical Rose fashion, she asked the smart question. "What are you going to do with it?" "I don't know yet," Louis admitted. "But first, we're moving. Somewhere better. Somewhere safe." Rose smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in months. "Can I have a real art studio?" "You can have 10 art studios if you want." She laughed. They hugged in the kitchen, just the two of them, while the morning sun came through the windows and turned everything gold. The news hit the local papers. Small story, back page, but enough that people noticed. Louis Vale, local engineer, wins $40 million in lawsuit against industrial manufacturer. Louis bought a house on the lake, a quiet place with space and light. Has it up a room for Rose's art. He put the rest in investments, in trusts, in safe places where it could grow quietly. That he didn't buy a fancy car. He didn't take expensive vacations. He lived the same way he always had, just with less worry. And then Ruby called. Louis saw her name on his phone and let go to voicemail. She called again, then again. Then she started texting. "I heard about the lawsuit. We need to talk. You owe me, Louis. I was your wife when that happened." He deleted the messages without reading past the first few words. Heck knew exactly where this was going out a week later. She showed up at the house. Louis was in the garage, working on a small engine repair for a neighbor. He heard the car in the driveway and looked up to see Ruby getting out an old Honda. Not Ryland's BMW. The BMW was long gone, probably repossessed. She looked different. Older, worn down. The years hadn't been kind to her. Her clothes were cheaper, her makeup less careful. She saw him in the garage and walked over, trying to smile. "Hey, Louis." He set down his wrench. "What do you want?" "That's a nice way to greet your ex-wife. We're not divorced yet. The papers are still processing, right?" "Well," she crossed her arms, suddenly uncomfortable. "I heard about your settlement." "Did you?" $40 million. That's incredible. I'm happy for you." Louis said nothing. He watched her, waiting. Ruby shifted her weight. "The thing is, we were married when the accident happened. When you were working there. So technically, some off-hat money is community property. I've talked to a lawyer, and he said no." "Louis, listen, no, Ruby. You left. You chose Ryland. You chose a life without me. You didn't get to come back now because you heard I have money." Her face hardened. The false sweetness dropped away. "I was your wife for 10 years. I supported you. You complained about me for 10 years. There's a difference. I deserve something. You deserve exactly what you chose. Go ask Ryland for money. I'm sure his entrepreneurial ventures are going well." Ruby's hands clenched into fists. "Don't be an ass, Louis. This is serious. I'm barely making rent. Ryland and I are. Things are tight. That's not my problem. Rose is still my daughter. I need to be able to provide for her. Rose lives with me. She's always lived with me. You see her maybe once a month, if that. Because I've been struggling. If I had money, you could what? Buy her love? It doesn't work that way." Ruby's face flushed red. "You always thought you were better than me. You in your moral superiority. But you're just scared, Louis, scared to live. Scared to take risks. Is that what Ryland is? A risk? He's more of a man than you ever were." Louis picked up his wrench and went back to the engine. "You should go. I'm not done." "Yes, you are. Get off my property, Ruby." She stood there, shaking with anger. Then she pulled out her phone. "Fine. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Looking forward to it." She stormed back to her car and peeled out of the driveway. Louis watched her go, then returned to his work. His hands were steady. His pulse was calm. She tried to manipulate him, and it hadn't worked. He should have felt satisfied. Instead, he just felt tired. Rose was in 10th grade now, doing well in advanced classes, getting ready to think about colleges. Lewis drove her to school most mornings, but sometimes she rode with friends out on a Thursday in March. She rode home with a friend named Emma. They were supposed to stop at Emma's house to work on a history project. Lewis was at home, sitting at his desk in the study, reviewing some investment documents his financial advisor had sent over. Numbers and projections, ways to make the money work, ways to build security for Rose's future. College funds, trust accounts, investments that would grow over time. He was highlighting a section about tax-advantaged education savings when his phone rang. Rose's number lit up the screen that he answered immediately, smiling. "Hey, sweetheart." But it wasn't Rose. It was Emma's mother, Janet Morrison. Her voice was tight, high-pitched with panic. "Mr. Vale? This is Janet Morrison. Emma's mom. Something happened at the school. Rose is okay, but you need to come get her. Right now. Something happened." Lewis's stomach dropped. He was already standing, already grabbing his skis. "What happened? Where is she?" "We're in the parking lot. By the main entrance. Just come. Please. Shenzhou." Lewis was in his car before she finished talking, before his mind could fully process what something happened meant. He drove faster than he should have, running a red light, taking corners too sharp. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. His mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Accident. Injury? Fight? Rose was a good kid, never got in trouble, never caused problems. What could have happened? When he pulled into the school parking lot, he saw Rose sitting on a bench near the main entrance. Emma and her mother stood beside her. But it was Rose's face that made his heart stop. She was hunched forward, her hair hanging down, one hand pressed to her mouth. Even from a distance, he could see the red on her shirt. Blood. Lewis was out of the car before it fully stopped. He didn't bother closing a door, didn't bother turning off the engine. He just ran. "Rose." She looked up, and when she saw him, her face crumpled. All the careful control she'd been maintaining shattered. She was 9 years old again, small and scared and needing her father. He dropped to his knees in front of the bench, his hands reaching for her but afraid to touch, afraid to hurt her further. There was blood on her shirt, on her hands. Her lip was split and swollen. A bruise was forming on her left cheek, dark purple spreading under her skin. Her right arm had scrapes on it, raw and red. "What happened?" His voice came out harder than he intended, sharp with fear. "Rose, baby, what happened?" She tried to speak but started crying instead, great gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Lewis pulled her into his arms, careful of her injuries, and she buried her face in his shoulder. He could feel her shaking. Janet Morrison spoke, her voice unsteady. Two people, a man and a woman, they grabbed her in the parking lot after school. They were asking about money. "About you. We called the police already. They're on their way." Lewis felt ice flood his veins. Who grabbed her?" Rose pulled back slightly, just enough to look at him. Her eyes were red, terrified. She looked at him, and he saw it in her face before she said the words. He knew. Somehow he already knew. "Mom," Rose whispered, her voice breaking. "Mom and Rylan." The world tilted. For a moment, Lewis couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Ruby, his ex-wife, Rose's mother. She'd done this. She'd hurt their daughter, and not just hurt, attacked, threatened, used her as a weapon. They sat in the emergency room while a nurse checked Rose over. Minor injuries, the doctor said. Bruised cheek, split lip, some scrapes on her arm. Nothing broken. But the look in Rose's eyes, that was damage that won't heal with ice and bandages. Lewis sat beside her bed, holding her hand. She'd stopped crying but hadn't said much. Janet Morrison had given her statement to the police before leaving. The school had security footage. Finally, Rose spoke. Her voice was small, younger than her 14 years. They were waiting by Emma's car. Rylan grabbed me. He said, she swallowed hard. He said I needed to tell you to give them half. Half of everything. He said if you didn't, he'd make me. Her voice broke. Lewis squeezed her hand. He hit me, Dad. I tried to pull away. He hit me. Where was your mother? Just standing there. She kept saying, Rylan, stop, we're just talking to her. But she didn't stop him. She just stood there. Lewis felt something crack inside him. Not his heart. that had broken years ago when Ruby left. This was something deeper, something foundational. It was the last thread of civility, of restraint, of try to do the right thing that IT snapped clean through. Dad, Rose looked at him. What are we going to do? Lewis met her eyes. His voice came out flat, cold, empty of everything except purpose. We're going to make them pay. Lewis didn't sleep that night. Rose was in her room, door closed. The doctor had given her pain medication, but Lewis could hear her moving around, probably unable to shut her mind off. He knew the feeling. His own thoughts moved in tight, precise circles. Ruby and Rylan had crossed a line. They'd gone after his daughter. They dirt her, threatened her, used her as leverage. And for what? Money. They'd attacked a 14-year-old girl for money. Lewis sat at his kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. He wrote down everything he knew about Rylan Drew. Small-time dealer, hustler, con artist. He'd heard the rumors over the years through mutual acquaintances. Rylan sold pills, ran fake investment schemes, borrowed money he never paid back. The kind of man who looked successful but was always one step ahead of his debts. Ruby had chosen that. She'd left stability for flash, security for excitement. And now she'd helped that man hurt their daughter. Lewis wrote attorney at the top of his list. He needed someone good, someone ruthless. The lawyer he'd used for the lawsuit was too soft for this. He needed a killer. At T8 in the morning, Lewis called a number he'd gotten from his financial advisor. Alicia Hamley ran a small practice in Charlotte, but her reputation was ironclad. She'd worked for a major corporate firm before going independent, taking only cases that interested her. She was expensive, but expense wasn't a problem anymore. Her assistant answered. Lewis explained what he needed. Hold, please. The assistant said. 2 minutes later, a woman's voice came on the line. Direct, no nonsense. This is Alicia Hamley. Tell me what happened. Lewis told her. The attack, the threats, Rose's injuries, the security footage at the school. He kept his voice level, factual. When he finished, there was silence on the other end. Then Alicia said, and you want to go after them legally? I want to destroy them. Legally? Yes. Good. Because what they did gives us plenty to work with. Assault, child endangerment, extortion, intimidation. We can file criminal charges and civil suits. We can get restraining orders. We can take custody away from your ex-wife permanently. She paused. This won't be cheap. I don't care what it costs. Then meet me in my office tomorrow morning. Bring all the documentation you have. Police reports, medical records, anything relative to your ex-wife's custody arrangement. We're going to bury them so deep they'll never see daylight. Lewis felt something settle in his chest. Purpose. Direction. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly. Good, Lewis said, and he meant it. Alicia Hamley's office was in a renovated warehouse in downtown Charlotte. All exposed brick and modern furniture. The kind of place that said success without screaming it. She was in her mid-40s, sharp-featured, with gray streaking through dark hair pulled back tight. She shook Lewis's hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. Sit, she said, gesturing to a leather chair across from her desk. Lewis sat. He'd brought a folder thick with documents. The police report from Rose's attack, medical records, text from Ruby demanding money, photos of Rose's injuries. He slid it across the desk. Alicia flipped through it, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she looked up. Your ex-wife is an idiot. I know. And this Rylan Drew. He's got a record. Multiple arrests, nothing that stuck but a pattern. Drugs, fraud, assault. He's a walking liability. She tapped the folder. We can work with this. First, we file for emergency custody. Given the attack, I can get an injunction keeping both of them away from Rose. Then we pursue criminal charges through the DA's office. Assault on a minor, extortion, criminal threats. Will it stick with the school security footage? Absolutely. They were stupid enough to attack her in a public place with cameras. We have evidence, witnesses, and a victim who'll testify. She leaned forward. But here's the thing, Lewis. Criminal charges are one piece. I'm guessing you want more than just jail time. I want everything. Custody, restraining orders, civil damages. I want Ruby to lose every right she has to Rose. I want Rylan in prison for as long as possible. Alicia smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. Then we go nuclear. We paint Theme as a danger to your daughter. We document every instance of neglect, every missed visit, every broken promise. We show the court that Ruby Vale chose a drug dealer over her child's safety. And we make sure neither of them can ever touch you or Rose again. How long will this take? Months, maybe a year. These things move slow. But we start now, and we didn't stop until they're done. Lewis nodded. What do you need from me? Everything. Every interaction with Ruby and Rylan. Every text, every call, every visit. If they contact you, document it. If they come near Rose, call the police immediately. We build an airtight case that shows a pattern of behavior. We make them look like the predators they are. And the money? Lewis asked. Ruby's going to come after the settlement in divorce court. Let her try. You won the lawsuit 5 years after the separation. It happened while you were effectively living separate lives. A good lawyer, which I am, can argue that settlement is separate property. But even if she gets something, we'll tie it up in proceedings for so long she'll be bankrupt before she sees a dime. Lewis felt the tightness in his chest ease slightly. This woman knew what she was doing. There's one more thing, Alicia said. I'm going to dig into Rylan Drew's finances. If he's dealing drugs, running scams, there's money moving somewhere. If we can find proof of illegal activity, we hand that to the police. We make sure he doesn't just go to jail. We make sure he goes away for a long time. Do it. Alicia extended her hand. Then we have an agreement. I'll draw up the retainer paperwork. We start tomorrow. Lewis shook her hand. As he left the office, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt powerful. The criminal charges hit Ruby and Rylan 2 weeks later. Detective Ron Avery, who'd been assigned to the case, called Lewis to let him know. We've issued arrest warrants. They'll be picked up within the next few days. Good, Lewis said. Just so, they're going to make bail. Assault charges, even on a minor, usually don't hold someone without bond. But we'll get them in court. I understand. Lewis hung up and went to check on Rose. She'd been quiet since the attack, withdrawn. She still went to school, still did her homework, but something in her had dimmed. She looked older now, harder. She'd learned what Lewis had known for years, that the world could be cruel, and the people you trusted could hurt you most. He knocked on her door. Rose, come in. She was sitting on her bed, sketchbook in her lap. But the page was blank. Lewis sat beside her. Detective Avery called. They're arresting your mother and Rylan. Rose nodded. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look anything. Are you okay? Lewis asked. I don't know. She set the sketchbook aside. Is it wrong that I don't care? No, sweetheart. It's not wrong. She's my mom. I should care. But I don't feel anything. Is that bad? Lewis put his arm around her. You feel what you feel. There's no right or wrong here. Your mother hurt you. You don't owe her forgiveness. Rose leaned against him. Do you forgive her? No. Will you ever? No. She was quiet for a moment. Then good. While the criminal case moved through the system, Lewis focused on the civil side. Alicia filed for emergency custody, and the court granted it immediately. Ruby was barred from contacting Rose without supervision. Rylan was banned from any contact whatsoever. Ruby violated the order within a week. She called Lewis's phone at midnight, drunk or high, screaming about how it turned Rose against her, how he was poisoning their daughter's mind. Lewis recorded the call. Then he sent it to Alicia, who sent it to the court that Ruby's supervised visitation rights were suspended. Next, Lewis turned his attention to Rylan's finances. Alicia hired a private investigator, a former cop named Mike Torres. Within a month, Torres had mapped out Rylan's entire operation. Rylan wasn't just small time. He was running pills through 3 counties, using fake business accounts to launder money. He owed dealers in Charlotte, owed loan sharks in Greensboro, owed money to people who didn't take "I'll pay you later" as an answer. Lewis read the report and felt a cold satisfaction. Rylan Drew was a house off cards. All Lewis had to do was blow. He started with the creditors. Using information from Torres's report, Lewis, or rather, someone Torres knew, someone untraceable, leaked proof of Rylan's scams to the people he owed. Fake LLC documents, bounce checks, investment schemes that never paid out. Within 2 weeks, Rylan's BMW was repossessed. His few remaining clients vanished. The rental house where he and Ruby lived got an eviction notice. Ruby called Lewis again. This time, she was crying. "Please," she said. "Lewis, please. We're going to be on the street. Rylands, everything's falling apart. I need help." Lewis listened to her sob. He felt nothing. "You traded a home for a high," he said quietly. "Now live with your choice. You can't do this. You can't just. Rose needs her mother. Rose needs a mother who doesn't attack her in parking lots." That was Rylan. That wasn't me. You stood there and watched. Ruby's sobs turned to screams. "I hate you. I hate you, Lewis. You're doing this on purpose. You're ruining us." "No, Ruby. You ruined yourselves. I'm just making sure everyone knows it." He hung up. She called back 6 times. He blocked her number. The custody hearing was set for late May. Alicia prepared Rose to testify. They practiced what she'd say, how she'd handle the defense attorney's questions. Rose was nervous but resolute. "I want to do this," she told Lewis. "I want to tell them what happened." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. If I don't, she'll keep trying. She'll keep pretending she cares." Lewis looked at his daughter. No longer a child, not quite an adult, but somewhere in between, forged hard by circumstances she shouldn't have had to face. He was proud of her. He was heartbroken for her. He was furious at Ruby for forcing this choice. "Okay," he said. "Then we'll do this together." The hearing lasted 2 days. Ruby's lawyer tried to paint her as a struggling mother who'd made mistakes but deserved another chance. Alicia dismantled that argument piece by piece. She entered the text where Ruby demanded money. The voicemails where Ruby threatened Lewis. The medical records from Rose's attack. The testimony from the school security guard who'd seen Rylan hit Rose. The pattern of missed visits, broken promises, neglect. When Rose took the stand, she spoke clearly and calmly. Yes, Rylan had hit her. Yes, her mother had watched. Yes, she was afraid of them both. And oh, she did not want to see her mother without supervision. The judge's ruling came swift and absolute. Lewis was granted sole legal and physical custody. Ruby's parental rights were not terminated, but they were reduced to the barest minimum. Supervised visits only, pending completion of drug treatment and parenting classes. Ruby didn't show up for the verdict. She'd stopped coming after the first day of testimony. Outside the courthouse, Lewis stood with Rose in the spring sun. She looked exhausted but relieved. "It's over?" she asked. "The custody part is," Lewis said. "The criminal trial is next month. And then it'll be over. Then it'll be over." But Lewis knew better. It wouldn't be over until Rylan Drew was in prison and Ruby was out of their lives for good. He had one more move to make. Lewis called Ruby from a new number 2 weeks after the custody hearing. She answered on the first ring. "Hello, it's me," Lewis said. Silence. Then, "What do you want?" "I want to talk." "Now you want to talk?" "After you took everything from me." "You took everything from yourself, Ruby. But I'm willing to make this easier." He could hear her breathing, calculating. "Ow, meet me. Just you and me. Let's settle this like adults." "Why would I trust you?" "Because I'm offering you money." That got her attention. "How much?" $2 million. Cash. "You sign an agreement to stay out of my life and Rose's life, and I'll give you enough to start over. Move somewhere new. Get clean. Whatever you want." Ruby was quiet. Lewis could almost hear her thoughts spinning. $2 million was a fortune to her. It was also small enough to seem plausible, not so large that she'd suspect a trap. "I want 3, she said finally. $2 million. Take it or leave it." "Fine. But Rylan comes with me." "No, Lewis, he's part of my life now. If we're settling this, he needs to bet here." Lewis had expected this. Rylan wouldn't let Ruby meet him alone, not with money on the table. "Fine. Both of you. Saturday night, 7 o'clock. The steakhouse on Tryon Street." "Why there?" "Because it's public, neutral ground. Bring a lawyer if you want. But come ready to sign." Ruby hesitated. "This isn't a trick." "It's not a trick. I'm tired, Ruby. I'm tired of fighting. Let's just end this." She agreed. Lewis hung up and immediately called Detective Ron Avery. "I need a favor," Lewis said. Saturday night, Lewis arrived at the steakhouse at 6:45. He wore a suit, carried a briefcase. Inside the briefcase were fake settlement documents that Alicia had drawn up, just convincing enough to pass a quick glance, that he took a booth near the back. The restaurant was crowded, which was good. Witnesses that T7, Ruby, and Rylan walked in. Ruby looked worse than the last time Lewis had seen her. Thinner, paler, aged beyond her years. She wore a dress that had probably been nice once, but now hung loose on her frame. Rylan stood beside her, wearing a cheap suit, his eyes darting around the restaurant like he expected trouble. They saw Lewis and walked over. "Ruby," Lewis said, standing. "Rylan." Rylan didn't offer a handshake. "Let's get this over with." They sat. A waitress came by, but Lewis waved her off. "We're not eating, just talking." Rylan leaned forward. "Where's the money?" "It's in the briefcase. But first, we sign the documents." Lewis pulled out the papers and slid them across the table. Ruby grabbed them, scanning the pages. Rylan read over her shoulder. "This says we can never contact Rose," Ruby said. "That's right. And we can never sue you for any portion of the settlement." "Correct." Rylan's eyes narrowed. "What's to stop us from taking the money and suing anyway? The contract you're about to sign, it's legally binding." Rylan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You must think we're stupid. I think you're desperate. And I'm offering you a way out." Ruby looked at Rylan, then at Lewis. "Show us the money first." Lewis opened the briefcase. Inside were stacks of paper wrapped to look like bundles of cash. Enough to pass a glance, not enough to survive scrutiny, but Ruby's eyes lit up anyway. Okay, we'll sign." She grabbed a pen from her purse. Rylan stopped her. "Wait, I want to see the money. Actually see it." Lewis closed the briefcase. "Sign first." "No way. Money first. That's not how this works." Rylan stood up, anger flashing across his face. "You think you can play us? You think you can sit here and dangle money and we'll just—" The restaurant door opened. 3 uniformed police officers walked in, led by Detective Ron Avery. Lewis stood up, stepping away from the table. Rylan saw the cops, and his face went white. "What is this?" Ruby whispered. Detective Avery approached the table. "Rylan Drew, you're under arrest for assault, extortion, and criminal threats against a minor. You have the right to remain silent." Rylan tried to bolt, but 2 officers grabbed him. He struggled, yelling, but they had him cuffed within seconds. Ruby stood up, backing away. "I didn't do anything. This was all him." Another officer stepped forward. "Ruby Vale, you're also under arrest for assault and aiding and abetting." No, I didn't." Lewis tell them. Lewis looked at her. His face was empty, emotionless. "You knew Inato hit my daughter." Ruby's mouth opened, then closed. The officer cuffed her. She started crying, pleading, but Lewis just stood there and watched. Detective Avery picked up the briefcase. "We'll need this as evidence." "It's all yours," Lewis said. They led Ruby and Rylan out of the restaurant. The other diners stared. Lewis sat back down at the booth and finally ordered a drink. He'd won. The trial began in September, 6 months after Rose's attack. The courtroom was smaller than Lewis expected, just a narrow room with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. Hezit in the front row behind the prosecution's table. Rose sat beside him, quiet and composed in a simple blue dress. Across the aisle, Ruby and Rylan sat with their court-appointed attorneys. They couldn't afford private lawyers anymore. Ruby looked thin, jittery. Rylan looked angry, his jaw clenched tight. They didn't look at each other. They didn't look at Lewis. The prosecutor was a woman named Lisa Chun, mid-30s, sharp and efficient. She'd laid out the case to Lewis weeks ago. Assault on a minor, extortion, criminal threats. With the security footage, witness testimony, and Rose's willingness to testify, it was nearly airtight. "They'll try to minimize it," Lisa had said. "Rylan's lawyer will claim heat off the moment, that your daughter was never in real danger. Ruby's lawyer will say she was a victim too, manipulated by Rylan. But the facts are the facts." Now Lisa stood to give her opening statement. She outlined the attack, the threats, the pattern of harassment. She painted Ruby and Rylan as predators who'd targeted a child for money. Rylan's lawyer countered with a story about desperation, about a struggling couple who'd made terrible choices but never intended real harm. Ruby's lawyer tried to separate her from Rylan, portraying her as a bystander who'd panicked and frozen during the attack. Lewis watched it all with cold detachment. These were strategies, narratives, attempts to reshape reality into something more palatable. But a truth remained unchanged. They'd hurt Rose. They'd threatened her, they'd used her as a bargaining chip. That was all that mattered. The first witness was the school security guard who'd seen the attack. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s named Tom Rodriguez. He'd worked at school for a decade. Lisa Chen questioned him. "Can you describe what you saw on March 14th? Tom nodded. "I was doing my rounds in the parking lot. I saw two people, a man and a woman, grab a student near one of the cars. The man had hold of her arm. She was trying to pull away. What happened next? The man hit her. Open hand, right across the face. The girl fell. The woman was standing there, saying something, but she didn't try to stop him. Can you identify the man and woman you saw?" Tom pointed. "That's them. The two defendants." Lisa entered the security footage into evidence. The jury watched on a screen mounted to the wall. Even from a distance, the footage was damning. Rylan grabbing Rose. Rose pulling away. Rylan's hand striking her face. Ruby standing 6 feet away, arms crossed, watching. When the video ended, the courtroom was silent. That Ruby's lawyer tried to soften it during cross-examination. "Mr. Rodriguez, from that distance, could you clearly see my client's facial expressions?" "I could see enough." "Did you hear what she was saying?" "No, sir. I saw her standing there. She didn't try to help that girl. But you can't say for certain what she was thinking or feeling." Tom looked at the lawyer, then at Ruby. "I know what I saw. That woman watched a man hit a kid and didn't do a thing to stop it." The second day, Rose testified. Lewis had asked her twice if she was sure she wanted to do this. Both times she'd said yes. Now she sat in the witness chair, her hands folded in her lap. Lisa Chan approached gently. "Rose, I know this is difficult. Take your time. Can you tell us what happened on March 14th? Rose's voice was steady. "I was leaving school with my friend Emma. We were walking to her mom's car. Then my mom and Rylan showed up. What did they say? Rylan said I needed to tell my dad to give them half. Half of his money. He said if my dad didn't, he'd make me regret it. What did you do?" I tried to walk away, but Rylan grabbed my arm. He was squeezing really hard. He kept yelling about the money. I told him to let go. And then Rose's voice dropped slightly. "He hit me, right across the face. I fell down. My mouth was bleeding." "Where was your mother during this?" "Standing there. She told Rylan to stop, but she didn't do anything. She just watched." Lisa paused. "Rose, do you remember what Rylan said after he hit you?" Rose nodded. "He said, 'Tell your daddy I want what's mine,' or 'I'll make you wish you were never born.'" A murmur went through the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. Lisa continued. "Did you believe he would hurt you again?" "Yes." "Are you afraid of him now?" "Yes." "Are you afraid of your mother?" Rose looked at Ruby for the first time. Ruby was crying, shaking her head, but Rose's expression didn't change. "I don't know," Rose said, "but I don't trust her." Rylan's lawyer tried to break Rose during cross-examination. He suggested she'd misunderstood, that Rylan had been joking, that she'd exaggerated the threat. Rose didn't budge. "He hit me," she said simply. "That's not a joke." Ruby's lawyer was gentler. "Rose, I know your relationship with your mother has been strained. Is it possible you're angry with her? That your testimony is influenced by that anger?" "I'm not angry," Rose said. "I'm just telling the truth. But you haven't seen your mother in months. Don't you miss her?" Rose was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I miss the mother I thought I had. But that person doesn't exist." Ruby sobbed audibly. Her lawyer moved on, but the damage was done. On the third day, Ruby took the stand in her own defense. Her lawyer led her through a narrative of victimhood. She'd been manipulated by Rylan, pressured into bad decisions, overwhelmed by financial stress. She claimed she tried to stop Rylan from hitting Rose, but had been too scared to intervene. "I never wanted to hurt her," Ruby said, tears streaming. "She's my daughter. I love her." The prosecutor's cross-examination was brutal. "Mrs. Vale, you love your daughter?" "Yes." "Then why did you demand money from her father after leaving him for another man?" I needed help. We were struggling. So you contacted your ex-husband, who you'd left, and demanded a share off money he'd won after you abandoned the marriage." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" Ruby faltered. I thought I deserved something. And when your ex-husband refused, you and Mr. Drew decided to use your daughter as leverage? No, that was Ryland's idea, but you went along with it. I didn't know he was going to hit her. You stood there and watched him do it. Ruby's face crumpled. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. You could have stopped him. You could have called for help. You could have protected your daughter. But you didn't. Ruby had no answer. Ryland testified last. He was defiant, aggressive. He claimed he'd never intended to hurt Rose, that she'd provoked him, that the whole situation had been blown out of proportion. She was mouthing off, Ryland said, being disrespectful. I was trying to have a conversation, and she got in my face. The prosecutor didn't even bother hiding her contempt. So you hit a 14-year-old girl because she was disrespectful? I didn't hit her. I tapped her. She overreacted. The security footage shows you striking her hard enough to knock her down. She tripped. And the threats you made, I didn't threaten nobody. I was just trying to get what I was owed. What you were owed. What exactly did Rose Vale owe you? Ryland's face darkened. Her old man owes me. I took care of Ruby. I tried to be a father to that girl. You tried to extort money from her actual father, and when that didn't work, you assaulted her. That's not what happened. But everyone in the courtroom could see the truth. Ryland Drew was exactly what the prosecution had painted him as, a violent criminal who'd seen Lewis's money and decided to take it by force. Closing arguments came on the fourth day. The prosecutor summarized the evidence. The video, the testimony, the medical records. She showed the jury photos of Rose's injuries. She read a transcript of Ryland's threats. These defendants didn't just commit assault, she said. They terrorized a child. They used her as a tool to get money they had no right to. And when they didn't get what they wanted, they hurt her. That's not desperation, that's not a mistake. That's cruelty. Ruby's lawyer argued for mercy. Ruby Vale made terrible choices. Booch's not a monster. She's a woman who got involved with the wrong man and lost her way. She deserves a chance to make things right. Ryland's lawyer tried to minimize the assault. My client acted inappropriately, yes, but he didn't cause serious injury. He didn't plan this attack. He was frustrated and made a bad decision in the heat of the moment. The judge instructed the jury. They deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge was an older man named Walter Hayes, stern-faced and no-nonsense. He reviewed the case files, the testimony, the evidence, then looked at Ryland and Ruby. This court has seen many cases of assault, extortion, and child abuse, Judge Hayes said. But rarely have I seen such a clear example of adults preying on a child for financial gain. You didn't just hurt Rose Vale physically. You hurt her emotionally, psychologically. You betrayed the trust a child should have in her mother. You used violence as a tool of intimidation. And you showed no remorse until you were caught. He looked at Ryland. Mr. Drew, you have a history of criminal behavior. You've been given chances to change, and you've squandered everyone. This court sentences you to 20 years in state prison. Ryland's face went white. His lawyers started to object, but the judge held up a hand. Mrs. Vale, Judge Hayes continued, you were Rose's mother. You had a duty to protect her. Instead, you stood by and allowed her to be assaulted. You chose money over your daughter's safety. This court sentences you to 15 years in state prison. Ruby sobbed. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder, but she shook him off. Lewis stood to give a victim impact statement. He approached the bench, his face calm. Your Honor, I want to say something to my ex-wife. The judge nodded. Lewis turned to face Ruby. For years, you complained that I didn't give you enough. You wanted money, excitement, a different life. So you left and found someone who promised you those things. And when he couldn't deliver, you came after me, daughter. You helped a drug dealer threaten and hurt our child because you wanted money that wasn't yours. Ruby looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. Forgiveness is for those who regret, Lewis said quietly. You regret getting caught. That's all. You don't regret hurting Rose. You don't regret choosing Ryland over your family. You regret that your choices had consequences. He turned back to the judge. Thank you, Your Honor. The judge nodded. Bailiff, take the defendants into custody. Officers led Ruby and Ryland away. Ruby was still crying. Rylan was shouting about appeals. The courtroom doors closed behind them. Lewis sat back down next to Rose. She was quiet, her hands in her lap. "It's over," Lewis said. Rose nodded. "Yeah, it's over." 1 week after sentencing, Lewis met with Alicia Hanley in her office. "You did good work," Lewis said. "Thank you." Alicia smiled. "That's what you pay me for. But there's something I need to tell you." "What?" "Your ex-wife's lawyer filed a motion to appeal the sentence. It'll get denied, but he's also trying to come after your assets. He's arguing that Ruby is entitled to a portion of the settlement as community property." Lewis nodded. "I expected that." "Did you?" Alicia leaned back in her chair. "Because you never seemed concerned about it." "I wasn't." "Why not?" Lewis pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. "Because the money is in my name." Alicia opened the folder. Inside were legal documents establishing Approvate charitable foundation called the Vale Foundation for Industrial Safety. Lewis was listed as the managing director, but the assets, all $40 million, belonged to the foundation, not to him personally. Alicia's eyebrows went up. "When did you do this?" "About a week after I won the lawsuit. My financial advisor suggested it. I fund the foundation with the settlement money, and the foundation supports children affected by industrial accidents, scholarships, medical care, family support. And you control it. I manage it. But legally, the money isn't mine. It's the foundation's. Ruby can touch it. The IRS can't tax it beyond normal nonprofit regulations that it's protected." Alicia started to laugh. "You brilliant son of a gun. You didn't just win money. You created a fortress. I learned a long time ago that having money isn't the same as keeping it. This way, it goes to people who need it. Kids like Rose. Kids like I used to, and nobody can take it away." Alicia shook her head, impressed. "Ruby's lawyer is going to lose his mind when he finds out." "Good," Lewis said. "Let him." Lewis told Rose about the foundation that night over dinner. "So the money isn't really yours?" she asked. "It's in a foundation that helps people. I manage it, but it's not personal wealth. Not the way most people think of it. But we still have the house. We're still okay. We're more than okay. I made sure of that. But the bulk of the settlement is protected now. Nobody can claim it. Nobody can sue for it. It's safe." Rose was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. "That's really smart, Dad. I had good advice." "No," Rose said. "You're just smart. You always have been. Mom never saw that." Lewis reached across the table and took her hand. "Your mother saw what she wanted to see. That's not your fault, and it's not mine. It just is." Rose squeezed his hand. "I'm glad we're U.S. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." 1 year later, Lewis stood in a small art gallery in downtown Charlotte. The space was white-walled and bright, filled with paintings from local high school students. Rose's work hung in the center, a large canvas titled 40 Million Reasons. The painting showed a man standing alone on a hill, his back to the viewer. Below him, dark shapes writhed in shadows, faces, hands, grasping things that couldn't quite reach him. Above, the sky was open and clear, painted in shades of blue and gold. It was powerful. It was honest. People moved through the gallery, studying the artwork, murmuring appreciation. Rose stood near the back, talking to a teacher. She wore a simple black dress and had her hair pulled back. She looked confident, grown up. She turned 16 last month. She'd started thinking about colleges, about art schools, about the future that she'd stopped asking about Ruby. The letters Ruby sent from prison went unanswered. The few phone calls the prison allowed went ignored. Ruby was the past. Rose was focused on what came next. Lewis was proud of her that a reporter approached him near the gallery entrance. Young guy, probably mid-20s, with a notebook and an eager expression. "Excuse me, are you Lewis Vale?" Lewis glanced at him. "I am. I'm doing a piece on the art show. I recognized you from the trial coverage last year. Do you mind if I ask a few questions? Keep it brief." Sure. The reporter flipped open his notebook. "Your daughter's painting is getting a lot of attention. It's called 40 Million Reasons. That's a reference to your lawsuit settlement, right? You'd have to ask my daughter what it means. Do you ever think about your ex-wife? About what happened?" Lewis looked at the reporter. His expression was flat, unreadable. Then he said, Only when I thank her for showing me who I really am. What do you mean by that? I mean, I spent a lot of years trying to be what she wanted. Try to earn enough, give enough, be enough. It never worked. So she left. And in leaving, she showed me that I was already enough. I just needed a seat. The reporter scribbled notes. There are rumors that you set up the arrest at the restaurant, that you lured them there deliberately. They chose to come. They chose to threaten my daughter. I just made sure there were consequences. Some people might call that revenge. Some people might call it justice. The reporter looked up. Do you regret any of it? The trial, the sentences? Lewis was quiet for a moment. Then he shook his head. No, I protected me daughter. I made sure the people who hurt her couldn't do it again, that's not something I regret. That's something I do 100 times over. The reporter thanked him and moved on to interview someone else. Lewis walked over to Rose. How's it going? He asked. Rose smiled. Good. People really like the paintings. They should. They're excellent. She glanced at the painting of the man on the hill. Do you like it? I love it. It's you, you know. In the painting. I know. The shadows are Mom and Rylan. And everyone else who tried to drag you down. Lewis put his arm around her. You made me look strong. You are strong, Dad. You always have been. They stood together, looking at the painting. The man on the hill, standing tall while shadows crawled beneath him. A symbol of survival, of resilience, of refusing to be broken. Outside, the sun was setting over Charlotte. The gallery lights came on, warm and golden. People laughed, talked, celebrated the art. Lewis thought about the last 15 years. The struggle, the betrayal, the fight. He thought about Ruby in prison, about Rylan in his cell. He thought about the foundation, about the kids it would help, about the good that had come from so much pain. That he thought about Rose, standing beside him, whole and safe in his. And he realized something. He'd won. Not just in court, not just with money. He'd won the only battle that mattered. He'd kept his daughter safe. He'd built something that couldn't be destroyed. He'd survived. Come on, Lewis said. Let's get some air. They walked outside into the evening. The city stretched around them, full off lights and noise and life. Lewis felt the weight of the last year lift slightly. Not gone. It would never be fully gone, but lighter. Rose took his hand. Dad? Yeah, thank you. For what? For everything. For not giving up. For fighting for me. Lewis squeezed her hand. Always, sweetheart. Always. They walked down the street, father and daughter side by side. Behind them, the gallery glowed with light. Ahead, the future waited, uncertain but theirs. Lewis had 40 million reasons to be grateful, but only one that truly mattered.